Hi guys, it's Annie, and today we have my best books of 2020 video. So sit back, relax, grab a drink, and let's get started. So I am going in order of when I read these books. The first one is Wild by Cheryl Strayed. And I actually gave this book 4 stars because I don't really like Cheryl Strayed as a person that much. Not that there's anything wrong with her, but you know, we just didn't vibe, and it was her memoir. But it says something that I didn't actually like the author of the memoir, but I still think it's one of the best books of 2020. This book was so powerful, like so inspiring. It made me want to go hike the Pacific Crest Trail, even though I have no experience in doing that at all. It was just amazing. This woman is totally a mess. She's a mess in her life. Everything is going wrong. You know, her marriage, she's an addict, all this stuff, and she decides to hike the Pacific Crest Trail. Also with like no experience, I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly. Again, it's been a while since I read this. And she does it. I mean, it's an inspiration. And hearing about her troubles on the trail, the people she meets on the trail, her thoughts while hiking, it's just really inspiring and definitely makes you think. So, highly recommend this book. The next book is I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara. I love books about serial killers, and this book was amazing, incredibly thorough. It's about this woman's obsessive search to find the Golden State Killer, and unfortunately she dies while writing, and she never got to see the Golden State Killer actually be found and arrested. But her search efforts were absolutely inspiring and so amazing. Even if you don't like nonfiction or true crime stories, I really recommend you pick this up. It is just one of the best books I've read. Definitely one of my favorite nonfiction books, and also one of the best books I've read in a really long time, just in general. The next book is another memoir. I promise there are some fiction books on this list. It is Karamo's Autobiography from Queer Eye. I love that show. Let me know in the comments if you also love Queer Eye. Karamo's Autobiography was breathtaking. I was so shocked while reading it. I knew nothing about his past. I didn't know that he was on an MTV show. I had no idea. And out of all the Queer Eye boys' autobiographies that I've read Jonathan's, I've read Tan's. I think those are the only other 2 that have them out right now, as far as I'm aware. But Karamo's just blew me away. He is such a kind-hearted person, and the way he helps the people on Queer Eye is just so genuine and so true, and he really helps them an incredible amount. He's just such an amazing social worker and counselor, and he gives amazing advice. And reading about what he went through, how he went from being such a troubled, in some ways bad person he could be considered, and he grows into such a better person. And it was really inspiring to see that, to see him come back from what he went through and all his troubles, his addictions, his relationship and abusive tendencies, and coming out of that a better person really gives me hope. It gave me hope that people aren't all bad, and it just made me love Karamo even more. Highly, highly recommended. The next book I want to recommend is The 3-Body Problem. I read this first book, and then I binge read the second 2 books of the trilogy. I loved it so much. If you're a sci-fi fan, please read this if you have not already. It is so creative, so good. It is so good. First contact with aliens, which I love. Love aliens. I love them. it is so good, so creative, so fresh. Yes, there are some issues with the book. There's some sexism issues. But yeah, I personally was able to read around it, and I still loved it, still gave it 5 stars. I thought it was absolutely phenomenal. So please, highly recommend the whole trilogy, not just the first book. I gave the whole trilogy 5 stars. It was just so great. Each book was better than the last, in my opinion. So good. The next book is another memoir, Untamed by Glennon Doyle. I didn't really know what to expect going into this book, but I remember while reading it, it was pretty much exactly what I needed at the time. I was going through a really hard time. Just everything just hit me really hard. It was so inspirational, so amazing, and it's really inspiring to see a memoir like this, and it's almost like a self-help kind of book in a way, written by an LGBT woman. It's really inspiring, and I think she's also like a Christian blogger or something, which I didn't know before I read this, so that's even more interesting. And she's like married to this soccer star, which is so cool. But it's another book that really takes a look at second chances in life. Like, you think you have to make all the right choices in life to really succeed, but life is what you make of it, and you can always go back and redo things. So I really appreciated this book. I think the message of it was absolutely beautiful, and it's one of the most memorable books of this year, absolutely, and definitely one of the best self-improvement books that I read this entire year. The next book is Room by Emma Donoghue. I read this on a recommendation from my good friend here, and he did not disappoint. It was so amazing. It's about this woman who gets kidnapped as a college student, and she's forced to live in this man's shed. And eventually, after being captive for him for so long, she has his baby, and it is the story of this woman and her son who finally make their escape, and the aftermath of escaping and her mental struggles with reintegrating into the world outside this man's shed, and her psychological struggles, her son's struggles. It's just a really, really beautiful book. The movie adaptation is also wonderfully done. Brie Larson is the star, and it's just amazing. I really recommend this. Even if you're not interested in true crime, it's just a beautiful book, and I really recommend it to everyone. The next book is, I think, my favorite of this entire year. It is Educated by Tara Westover. I was completely blown away the entire time I read this. Tara went through hell. It was absolutely unbelievable. So powerful. It's about this family of super religious Mormons who are living in this isolated area, and they're on top of this mountain, and they're survivalists. They're not allowed to go to school. They don't even have birth certificates, and they're totally self-sufficient, or at least they want to be. They're convinced that the apocalypse is going to come, or the government is going to come and convert them or force them to do something they don't want to do, and so the kids are kept at home, and, you know, they can't go to school, no birth certificates, no nothing. It's just, they can't go to the doctor. Like, it's just absolutely unbelievable. And I don't want to give anything away, but obviously it's a very abusive household, and just this woman's journey from being raised in that environment to getting her college degree from a super prestigious university and writing this book. It's just unbelievable. And again, this book, I mean, obviously my situation is nothing compared to hers, but just, I really connected with her because the amount of gaslighting she experienced, it's real. I've been in those situations, and it's real, and no one believes you, or people know that you're right, or they just tell you that you're wrong, and you have to be so strong to know inside that you're right when everyone else is telling you that you're wrong. And she is just an amazing, strong woman. I really, really wish that everyone would read this book. The next book is a nonfiction book called Why We Sleep. It was so good, so interesting. I knew nothing really about the neuroscience behind sleep, and this book was super accessible. You know, I have no background in anything like that. I'm a humanities person, but it was so good, so good. And it helped me with my sleep habits. I didn't know, for example, that having the room be a little bit too cold is actually good. It helps you fall asleep. And I found that it actually does. It helps. And knowing how important sleep is really makes me pay attention to it more. Like, just hearing about all the ill effects that even one missed night of sleep can give you was kind of scary, but it was very, very good. Very useful, important information for everyone. The next book is probably my favorite fiction of this year. It is Cersei by Madeline Miller. I love Madeline Miller. I love The Song of Achilles. I was kind of scared to read this because I was worried that I love Song of Achilles so much and maybe I wouldn't like this as much, but this was so, so good from beginning to end. The audiobook was perfect. The narrator, beautiful. Oh my gosh. Just such a great book about a powerful, powerful woman from Greek mythology. So good. She's a witch. Amazing. I loved her. I love her so much. I could reread this book, and I never reread any books. So that should tell you. This book is the best of the best. One of the greatest that I have ever read. Just absolutely beautiful. Of course, Madeline Miller's writing, just absolutely breathtakingly gorgeous. So please, please read this if you haven't already. Another nonfiction book is Unnatural Causes by Dr. Richard Shepard. I was hooked on this book. I could not put it down. I read it in like 2 days. Absolutely so captivating and interesting. This man was Britain's top forensic pathologist, and he writes about his experiences dealing with dead bodies in his line of work. And he is extremely respectful to the victims of the crimes that he was working on. And it's just so well written. It's a perfect balance of his personal life with his work life, and it's so, so good. I knew nothing about forensic pathology. I really like true crime, so I think that obviously helped, and that's one of the reasons why I picked up this book in the first place. But oh man, it's so, so good. So interesting. Highly recommend this book. The next book is also a contender for my favorite fiction book of this year. It is The Empress of Salt and Fortune by Ngivo. Oh, so good. Oh my god. It was so good. I also read When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain by Ngivo. It's the sequel to The Empress of Salt and Fortune. Came out this December. Go read it if you haven't yet. It's amazing as well. I gave both 5 stars. We follow the protagonist Chi, who is a cleric who goes around this world that is inspired by, it's like an Asian fantasy world. Super amazing world building, by the way. And she is a non-binary character, first of all, which, yes, amazing, great, yes, please, oh, amazing. And they go around and tell stories or hear stories from the people that they meet. And the Empress of Salt and Fortune was just beautiful. It's so beautiful. It was so short because it's a novella, but it was perfect. It didn't feel like it was too short. It didn't feel like any parts were missing or unnecessary. The writing style was absolutely beautiful. Really kept you captivated. And oh my god, I will read anything Nival writes from now on. I am so excited for her next book that's coming out in 2021. I love this book. It is just beautiful, and I can't wait to read more about Chi's adventures. The next book is Pet Sematary by Stephen King. I know a lot of people have a lot of opinions about Stephen King, but this is one of the best books I've ever read in my entire life. I want to say that right now. I know I like Stephen King, mostly. I like his horror stuff, but he is quite long-winded, and, I have some issues with some of his books, but this book, from beginning to end, just amazing. Like, oh my god, it was so amazing. It's not just a horror, the characters in it are so well done, so well fleshed out. They feel real. They feel like they are coming out of the page and that they are real people. Even the small side characters are so well done and feel so real. The exploration of grief in this book is so real as well. It's very upsetting. So if you're sensitive to that kind of stuff, steer clear of this. But if you want a beautiful, inspired book that is part horror and part an exploration of human emotion and exploration into how we deal with mental distress, especially from grief, absolutely read this. It is Stephen King's best book. Oh my god, I've been talking for so long. Okay, here we go. Next book. It is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. Wow. That's all I can say. Just wow. Beautiful. Beautiful. The concept, gorgeous. This woman commits suicide, not a spoiler. She commits suicide and she is brought to this midnight library where all the books are filled with alternate versions of her life depending on the choices she could have made. And she gets to explore these choices and see what kind of life she could have lived where maybe she would have been happier. It's another book with the theme of it's not too late. And even if you're unhappy or dissatisfied or you feel like all hope is lost in your life, it's not. The main character was super relatable. I loved her. I want this. I want the Midnight Library. But it really, I just absolutely, I can't even talk because I love the book so much that I have so much to say about it that I'm getting jumbled. It was so good. It's another book that I want to reread, even though I never reread books. Just all the worlds that she goes into are just so well done. And it's not too much. It's not too little. It's the perfect balance. And you really see how her perspective changes from the beginning to the end of the book. And I don't want to give anything away, but I highly recommend this. It's also a pretty quick read. I think it's 300 something pages. So definitely one of the best books of this year. The next book, will anyone be surprised? It is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. And I know everyone, well not everyone, but a lot of people love this book. It's all over Booktube, and I think with good reason. It's not the best book I've ever read, far from it, but it was beautiful. V.E. Schwab's writing in this was top-notch. So good. I think a lot of things could have been done better, but I heard someone, I don't remember who it was, I'm sorry, but someone on Booktube talked about how this was just a story that had to be written down, and I 100% agree with that. So even though it's not perfect, it's not perfectly executed, it doesn't have to be, in my opinion. It's just a beautiful, beautiful story. I'm sure everyone knows what it's about by now. This girl, Addie, makes a deal with a devil-like demon to be immortal, but in exchange, no one can remember who she is. And just that concept alone, beautiful. And I really agree that the execution doesn't have to be perfect because it's just the type of story that as soon as V.E. Schwab came up with it, I'm sure she thought, wow, I have to write this. I have to do it. I really, really enjoyed it. I gave it 5 stars. I loved it. It's a very special book, and I do highly recommend it. The next one is a short sci-fi novella called To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers. And if anyone watches Books with Emily Fox here, You will know this book. She loves it, and that's where I heard about it. This book is so wholesome. It's wholesome sci-fi, which is not usually what you think of when you think of sci-fi. But this group of astronauts goes and explores new worlds, but while they're away, something happens on Earth and they can't get in contact with anyone. The book explores them and how they deal with this internally, and how they deal with being so far from home and so unsure about the situation. And it also deals with their relationships with each other. And it's like kind of a found family situation, and I just loved reading about them. All these characters, all of their personalities are so different from each other, but they all work in harmony, and they're all very well fleshed out. The writing is great. The alien worlds that they visit are also super creative and really interesting to read about. I really recommend this. Because of this book, I want to read Becky Chambers' other works as well, and I'm really excited to. The next book is The Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek by Kim Michelle Richardson. I loved this book. I loved it. Oh my gosh. If you watched my November wrap-up video, you'll know that it's probably the best book I read in November. It is not usually the genre that I go for, but it's about this woman who has blue skin because of a genetic thing that runs in her family, and she deals with a lot of prejudice because of this. She lives in Kentucky, up in these isolated mountains in the 1930s, and she is a pack horse librarian, which means she goes around to the poor people in her area and brings them library books on a mule. And I loved her so much. She was such a great main character. I really felt for her throughout this whole book. Her perspective is so special. It's just a beautiful book. Absolutely one of the best books I've ever read. Highly recommend. The next book is I Am Malala. I think a lot of people have already read this, but I was late to the game. I think this book should be required reading for everyone. It is beautiful. Malala is such a strong person. Of course, I was familiar with her story before reading this book, but knowing in depth what she really went through, oh my god. It really gave me a better perspective of the issues surrounding it. And please, if you haven't already read this book, please go read it. Don't be like me and wait so long. Really, you should read this book. Alright, 2 more books. The next book is The Mermaid from Jeju by Sumi Han. And this just came out this December, and oh my gosh. I've said that all these books are beautiful on this list, but this book is really beautiful. If you liked Pachinko, read this book. I think this book is better than Pachinko. Absolutely amazing. It deals with this girl who is from Jeju Island in Korea after the Japanese imperialist government falls in Korea and the Americans come in, and she has to deal with the political climate that is so scary and unstable at that time. And she deals with so many things. And she meets this boy on one of her trips. And oh man, it's so good. So good. I highly recommend this. I knew I was gonna love it even before I read it, and I'm so happy it turned out to be true. This girl is a haenyeo, which means that she is a diver who can hold her breath for a really long time, and she's super strong, and she gathers like things like abalone and sea urchins from the seafloor to eat and sell. And it's just so interesting. Like, I've never read a book about that, and I love it. I love Korea's history. It's one of my things that I'm passionate about, so if you're also passionate about it like me, highly recommend this. And the last book is an honorable mention. It is The Lost Apothecary. I just posted a review of this book, so I'll link it up here. It's an honorable mention because it's not yet out. It comes out in 2021. This book I gave 5 stars. It is amazing. It's about this apothecary who sells women poison to discreetly kill men in their lives who are emotionally or physically abusing them. Such a great concept. I love it. Yes. And the 3 characters in this book, we follow one character who is in present-day London and 2 from the 1790s. None of them are bad, you know? Like, sometimes you see books with multiple points of view and one of them you really like and some you don't like. No, all of these characters are great and you want to root for all of them. And I love this story. I love all of the characters. It's so good. It's historical fiction in like a magically fantastical way. I think it really has something for everyone, so definitely recommend it. And check out my review. Alright guys, that was a long one, but that is my final list for my favorite books that I read in 2020. I'd love to hear your thoughts about these books, so please comment down below, and also tell me what your favorite books of 2020 were. I'd love to hear about them. So if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time. Happy New Year!